Sonic Adventure 2 is probably the best game in the entire franchise. Yes, I know it's a hot take, but with all the quality content the game has, it would be hard for me to say anything else is the best. But this game definitely went through a lot of different development stages, and some things really changed over the course of the game's creation. So how did this all come to be? How did a reveal trailer without any reference to Tails and no name for Shadow yet become one of the most revered games to ever come out on the Sega Dreamcast? This is going to be a pretty long video, but I wanted to really show the best stuff I could. Some things I'm just not going to include because 1, they're not that interesting, or 2, I just won't be able to really fit all of that into this video. So, let's begin. Hi everyone, I'm ModemCat, and today we'll be talking about the development story of Sonic Adventure 2. After the monumental success of the launch of the Dreamcast, and even more so Sonic Adventure, the first 3D entry in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, some things needed to change from the last entry, specifically involving the removal of Big the Cat, at least for the most part. See, Big the Cat is sort of in Sonic Adventure 2, specifically as an Easter egg, the most well-known instance of this being in City Escape, the game's first level during the truck chase part. He can also be seen in a prison cell in Tails' level Prison Lane, or fishing in Sonic's level Metal Harbor. Oddly, all of these cameos were removed in the GameCube port of the game, even though this version is supposedly the definitive version, but I'm not going to complain over a couple funny cameos removed. Other characters were also removed from Sonic Adventure 2. Some are still there but not playable, like Amy Rose, but others were completely removed, like Gamma. Which, I mean, with the nature of the end of Gamma's story, yeah, it makes sense why he wouldn't be in here. The character roster from Sonic Adventure 2 would end up being split between a hero story, a dark story, and a final story which ties them both together, with the hero characters being Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and the dark characters being Shadow, Eggman, and Rouge, with Rouge the Bat and Shadow the Hedgehog, originally named Ted Eos, being brand new characters to the series. Originally, it was believed that Tails would not make an appearance in the game due to his very strange absence in the announcement trailer. But he ended up appearing in the final game regardless, possibly only included due to fan demand. Similar to some of the earlier Sonic the Hedgehog titles, Sonic Adventure 2 was developed by Sonic Team USA in San Francisco, California, leading to a much more American feel to the game, especially in levels like City Escape. Work started on the game around October 1999, around 1 month after the American release of the Sega Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure. Development would last a year and a half, and gameplay would change a lot from Sonic Adventure 1 over this time. For instance, Sonic Adventure 1 features a much more open gameplay style, with 6 whole stories that all intertwine with all different gameplay styles. Although this made the game feel large, with new things to explore around every corner, to some fans it could feel bloated, and even confusing at times. Sega made some changes, removed 3 of the characters along with 3 of the gameplay styles, and added 3 new playable characters, and made the gameplay style much more linear. Instead of having 3 large hub worlds to explore, you just go from level to level and rotate gameplay styles. Overall, Sonic Adventure 2 does have more unique levels, with 30 or so overall counting the stories. Granted, some use similar assets or enemies, or have the same thing, but it doesn't really get repetitive. Personally, I believe this was a smart change. It certainly makes Sonic Adventure 2 age a lot better compared to its older brother. Now, a whole lot changed over the course of the game's development. Let's start with the first look at the game the public had at E3 2000, in the form of a trailer. The trailer starts with Sonic in what looks like an early version of Green Forest. Then we get a flash of the original logo. Here's a higher quality version for comparison. You know, I kinda like the original logo, although I do think the newer logo fits the game a whole lot more. We also see Knuckles in Pumpkin Hill, but even more notably, we see Sonic in Sky Rail. Now the reason this is interesting is because, well, Sky Rail isn't Sonic's level in the final game, it's Shadow's. So either this level could be played in-game by either character, or, much more likely, Shadow the Hedgehog's in-game model wasn't completely finished. Sonic is also shown in an early version of City Escape that looks completely pre-rendered. The layout of the cars is totally different, and the gun truck seems to look a little bit different too. What's really interesting is that 1. Shadow's name is never revealed, he is only referred to as the Ultimate Hedgehog, and 2. Rouge and Tails are not mentioned anywhere, and 3. The music in the video is not from Sonic Adventure 2. I'm not sure where it's from, but I'm sure it's not from Sonic Adventure 2. In the files of the game, a very early list of levels exists. Mostly it's just the final game's level out of order with a few missing, but it also contains some very weird bits of text, with Frying Dog, a funny misspelling of Flying Dog, one of the bosses in the game being my personal favorite. The Golem and Biohazard are also here. Anyhow, the first public prototype of the game was shipped out with copies of Phantasy Star Online version 1 in late 2000, still months away from the summer 2001 release date. The biggest thing you'll notice when you start it up is that the original logo in that E3 trailer is here, and the title screen looks dramatically different from the final version. One similarity with the final title screen are those Sonic and Shadow silhouettes in the background, but Sonic's in particular is quite different. Most obviously, he's not wearing his soap shoes, which carries for the rest of the demo. This is due to the fact that the soap shoes brand deal wasn't made until 2001, shortly before the game's release, as an afterthought. A very basic version of 2 players here, but it's quite stripped down. I won't get into everything here because they're fairly minute changes, but the opening cutscene for City Escape is slightly changed here, specifically the dialogue. Take a listen.
機内上映も機内食もないんじゃねえ。それに、機内上映も機内食もないんじゃねえ。それに、俺は走る方が好きなんでね。俺は走る方が好きなのさ。
More minor changes, like the font being Impress instead of Comic Sans and the billboards being different, are also here, but the bigger stuff is more interesting. What I find really odd is when you try to load any other stage, you get this ominous placeholder title card, and it freezes. Somewhat odd in this demo as well is the music. Specifically, the most popular track from the game, Escape from the City. The vocal version of the song was unfinished at this time, so an instrumental was used. The melody, which is played on a lead guitar, sounds pretty different at this point too. Take a listen. The title theme is also slightly different, but really only in the mix, so I won't show that here. The next public build of the game was Sonic Adventure Preview, which was sent out to press. It's the first version of the game so far with an English voiceover, though it's very incomplete, leading to characters using a mix and match of the Japanese voiceover and the English dub. The biggest example of this being the Japanese voice being used for the jumping sound, but the English voice being used for idle dialogue, like when Sonic says, Live and Learn also has this funny MIDI flute for the melody since the vocal track wasn't recorded yet, so we basically get a bad flute remix of the song, which is pretty great. A listing of all the music tracks can be found in the code, with some not even existing in this build yet. Similar to the Trials version of Live and Learn, the mix on Won't Stop Just Go, Green Forest music, has a different mix with weaker guitar tracks. It's not really worth talking about here though. Lots of Japanese voice clips are still here that go completely unused in this build, as well as the final. But they're not really worth going through here since there's so many of them. A Japanese voice replaces the normal English menu voice for the final, but it sounds pretty different. Here's a couple samples.
Story select, character select, recalls.
There's an Omochao line which doesn't have the normal voice filter on it that also goes unused in the final too. Have a listen.
Press A button and use L or R triggers while grinding to jump from rail to rail.
And what's funny about this clip is that the maneuver Omochao describes in the voiceover is impossible to do in any known build of the game, including this one. It does sound pretty similar to a later mechanic found in later Boost-era Sonic games, like Sonic Unleashed and Colors. And the last thing I'll say about this build is that there are various layout differences. Here are some screenshots of it. Most of these are pretty minor, but they're pretty interesting anyway, so I figured I'd show them here. The next build I'm going to take a look at is Sonic Adventure 2 Trial version. No, not that one. Yeah, there's actually 2 betas of Sonic Adventure 2 with Trial in the name, with this one being sent out to Japanese retailers around 1 month from the release. There's still a whole lot that isn't here yet or just isn't finished, so let's take a look. First of all, the title screen, which is only slightly different with Trial version down in the bottom left corner. The Dreamcast VMU normally displays this logo, but in this build, it shows this one. I kinda like the beta logo to me. It does a better job at representing the actual logo of the game, but to each their own. The intro to the game has a couple minor differences. Most notably, the metal sounds are a little different towards the end, and the intro is longer. On track 1 of the final games disc, there are 3 wallpapers that you can access by inserting the game disc into a PC. But what's most interesting is that this version of Adventure 2 only has 1 wallpaper, and it's completely absent in the final build of the game, which is a real drag because frankly, I love this background. Also on the disc are some copyright notes, and a list of all the entries in the series thus far. Oddly enough, this list doesn't contain Sonic CD, potentially due to the fact that CD has such a different game style from the Genesis games, or, more likely, I just forgot. It's unknown what this string of text is for, but it's possibly related to the 10th anniversary of Sonic promotion surrounding Sonic Adventure 2. The last bit of text is simply called abstract.txt, and it contains this little message. This is the trial version of Sonic Adventure 2. This software represents a work in progress. Please understand that this title is still in development and that you may find some unexpected problems that have not been corrected at the time of release. The next and last prototypes we'll be looking at are from May 2001, a month before the game came out, so don't get your hopes up for any earth-shattering differences, because everything here is only tiny changes. The first of the 2 prototypes is unnamed, but we'll call it the May 7th build, as that's what it's stated internally. It's officially the first finished prototype. There are tons of tiny differences to the level design, which I won't go into fully here, but here's a couple comparison shots. It's pretty interesting. The most intriguing out of the menu graphics is that the homepage button has a unique graphic on it that, although it is in the final game, it goes completely unused. I quite like this, but the only thing is that you can't really tell that this is meant to be grayed out, and, you know, be unselectable. The download event function is still unfinished and doesn't load any of the final game's DLC. It also uses the kart race mode's background instead of the green background in the final version. The cutscenes in this version have different lighting too, most notably in the first cutscene. Oddly enough, the May 7th prototype almost looks a bit better than the final version. You can see the gun logo a lot better on the helicopter. The credits background is also changed, and the aura is much less blocky. The next and last prototype is very close to the final game, so I won't be talking about it too much. This one is dated May 21st, only 2 weeks after the May 7th prototype, and it was sent out to European press right before the release of the game. Mostly what's different here are a couple Omochao lines for 2-player that are formatted slightly differently, the homepage being at a higher resolution, and a couple sounds being slightly different. The title screen and menus are the same as the final now, and everything is finalized except for the few tweaks I mentioned earlier. That's all I really have to say about this one. It was released not even a month later, so it's fairly obvious that not many crazy changes are here. The last thing I'll be covering today are things that go unused in the final version of the game. Firstly, there's a couple things from the debug menu in the trial, the May 7th build, and other prototypes that still exist here. But they're nothing more than leftovers and a collision map for the levels. An oddity found in the game's files is that Rouge and Knuckles have hints for Canon's core. The odd part about this is that, well, Rouge and Knuckles have no hint files in Canon's core, so what could these be? Well, disappointingly, their contents are just duplicates of the Japanese translations of their hints from Dry Lagoon and Wild Canyon, respectively. But why are they here? Well, my speculation is that maybe Canon's core was meant to have hints, but it was scrapped to maybe make the level a little bit more difficult, and it was scrapped so early in development that they didn't even have the final messages written out yet. Interestingly, Sonic's original shoe textures and old light dash upgrade are still present in the final game's files, even though his soap shoes are used in every build except for the trial. Now get ready for possibly the biggest source of unused content in the final game: Unused Graphics. Yeah, there's actually a lot of stuff that went unused, so let's get into it. Firstly, we have this weird item box graphic with a question mark on it. In previous games, specifically Adventure 1, these would give the player a random number of rings, but although it's here in Adventure 2, it goes completely unused. The headquarters radar is something that was totally scrapped from the level, even though the graphics are still there in the final game's files. Initially, this was a radar meant to track the beetle robots patrolling the stage, but its functionality seems to be completely removed in the final game. There's also a monitor screen texture from one of Eggman's cutscenes, specifically the one where he finds out that Sonic and his friends have made it to the Space Colony Ark. What's funny about this is that Tails is even holding the incorrect color of Emerald. He's holding the white Chaos Emerald, while for the rest of this act of the story, he's holding the yellow Chaos Emerald. Next up, we have some very interesting graphics relating to the two-player mode. These are life counter icons for all the unlockable Dreamcast two-player characters, specifically Amy, Metal Sonic, Chao, Big, Takao, and Chaos. The reason these go unused is simply because, well, the two-player system in SA2 doesn't use a life system. Here are some unused graphics from an earlier version of the game. The yellow and blue backgrounds were meant to have the text placed onto them. Also relating to the menu, there's these alternate unhighlighted buttons from the options menu. The only reason these are never seen is the game always loads the first graphic, which means that the secondary ones are never actually used in-game. There's also a couple tutorial screens that go totally unused. Here's one for explaining Mystic Melody for Tails and Eggman. Normally this screen would show up in the tutorial screen after they've obtained the upgrade, but oddly enough, it never appears here. This one is for explaining button prompts. They ended up using a different image for the tutorial instead. These are for explaining two-player attacks, and although Oma Chao does bring up the two-player attacks in tutorial mode, these are never shown, which is most likely due to an oversight or glitch. And lastly, we have this test graphic for the tutorial screens that just reads sample. Neat. Here's some leftovers from the trial version of Sonic Adventure 2. You can see that the title screen I mentioned earlier is still here, as well as some other graphics used in the demo, further emphasizing how close that build was to the final version of the game. Next up, we have some unused audio. Most interesting, this continue music that you're hearing right now. The reason this is so interesting is that Sonic Adventure 2 doesn't have a continue system, which means that this music goes unused. The music is actually from the continue screen of the first game, which means that this is likely just a leftover. Here are a couple short lines from Sonic that went unused, one of which for obvious reasons. Take a listen.
Those robots are a total pain in the... shoot.
Here are a few voice lines from a scrapped cutscene that was replaced by the Super Transformation sequence. Take a listen.
The space colony is still accelerating toward Earth. In 5 minutes, there will be no way to stop it.
Nothing can stop the colony now.
Mr. President, don't give up just yet. Sonic and his friends can still help us.
I've located the 2 hedgehogs. They're in the lower quadrant. The space colony has entered the Earth's atmosphere and is accelerating.
That's ridiculous. There's no way 2 hedgehogs can stop the colony now.
They can. I believe in them. Together they can do it. I just know it.
So, Oma Chao has a ridiculous amount of funny, unused dialogue. And although I don't have time to play all of it here, I thought you might want to hear some of the highlights.
Did you know the doctor's mustache is fake? I wonder how Big is doing. My allowance is all gone. Am I annoying you? I want to wind a spring. I lost my contact lenses.
And the last thing I'll be covering today are some leftovers from Sonic Adventure 1, like this item box and this hint box. I'm guessing that these were simply here for testing. And that pretty much covers it for today. If you want to learn more about the development of Sonic Adventure 2, go on over to the cutting room floor, link in description. That's where I got most of my information for this video from, and I seriously cannot thank them enough. And thank you guys for watching. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see a video like this on Sonic Adventure 1. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.
You know me, the fighting freak Knuckles, and we're at Pumpkin Hill.